Hi guys, I'm Dr. Tara Tobias. I want to welcome you all back to my channel. In today's home exercise tutorial, we are going to build on what I started last week, which was a series that was inspired by a comment where someone had said they can straighten their arm out when they're laying down, but when they go to stand or take a step, the arm flexes back up. And they really wanted ideas or suggestions on maybe how to retrain the arm to stay down when they were standing and when they were walking, or how to carry over some of that good arm extension they were getting when they were laying down, how to carry that over into standing and walking. So if you watched last week's video, we really just focused on straightening the arm out. It's really the first video I've done just isolating elbow movement. So I highly recommend that you go back and watch that video because you'll get a lot of great ideas on maybe some new exercises that you can add to your current home exercise program. So if you are someone where your arm flexes up more when you're standing and you're walking, then you're in the right place because that's what we're going to go over today. So just a little review. I won't go too in depth. You can go back and watch last week's video to understand this in a little bit more detail. But a few reasons why your arm might flex up when you go to stand up is due to spasticity. I talk about spasticity a lot. It's a major problem if you've had any damage to your brain due to a stroke, a brain injury, or a diagnosis such as MS. You can develop spasticity, which is really an involuntary movement in the arm. In this case, that would be spasticity in the bicep that will cause that arm to flex up. Now, why does it get worse when you stand up? There are a few reasons why. In my experience, I feel like it gets worse when people stand up. One is just the act of gravity forcing that arm down can trigger a spasm in the bicep or make that spasticity in the bicep a little bit worse. The other reason I feel like this might happen when you go to take a step is the inability to coordinate arm movement and leg movement at the same time, specifically when they are doing opposite movements. So if you have specific synergy patterns, which I talk a lot about in the arm and the leg, a lot of times they happen together. So when you go to move the leg and you flex the leg up, the arm's gonna flex up as well, and that's where you'll start to see that arm drop a little bit more. So having abnormal synergy patterns, but then also the inability to dissociate. So this is something that we develop during normal development. As the brain develops, if you can think about babies or visualize a baby, they're all or none. They're either all extension or all flexion, all extension, all flexion. As a baby's brain develops, they learn how to dissociate. So now visualize an infant who's learning how to crawl. They've learned how to dissociate the left side of the body from the right side of the body, and they've also learned how to dissociate their upper body from their lower body so that they can do different things at the same time. That's just the ability to dissociate. So a lot of times after stroke, you lose that, so everything kind of wants to work together, kind of like that infant example I mentioned. Either the arm and the leg will both extend or they'll both flex up. And obviously when you go to take a step, that type of an abnormal movement pattern isn't always helpful. So I hope all that made sense, because it's gonna hopefully make the exercises that I've selected make a little bit more sense. Now on to the exercises. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna backtrack a little bit. So before we get to standing, which I know in the last video I promised this video is to learn how to keep the arms straight and standing, it's best if we start laying down. And instead of the focus being on isolating arm movement like I'd done in the previous video, it's going to be maintaining a straight arm while we now incorporate leg movement. So relearning how to coordinate the upper body and the lower body. So we're going to do some leg movement without letting the arm flex up. Depending on where you're at in the recovery process and how severe your spasticity is, there's going to be different strategies you might need to use to keep the arm straight. If you have the control to straighten the arm out and leave it flat on the mat, that's great. That's where you're going to start. And now what we're going to do is we're going to incorporate some leg movement. Again, we want to coordinate upper body and lower body. In this case, dissociate almost, so be able to do lower body movement while keeping the upper body still. Here's where I'm going to bring in that Core Max again. I used it in the last video. I love this little home exercise machine. but you're gonna work hip extension. Now, the reason I like the Core Max versus, I know some of you are gonna ask me this, why can't you just do bridging to work on the muscles that we're gonna work right now? Bridging, which is with both feet on the ground and just lift on the mat and just lifting your bottom up. Both legs are doing the same thing at the same time. And although that's not bad, you're still learning how to dissociate the upper body from the lower body. I like the Core Max because you can learn how to dissociate the left side of the body and the right side of the body. Now, while you're doing that, remember the main objective is to make sure that arm does not flex up and come towards your face. If when you go to move your legs, the arm comes up at all, you might need to go to a more aggressive method of keeping that arm straight. The next more aggressive method would just be to put some weights on the arm to hold the arm down and try again. Start pushing down on that Core Max. If that doesn't work, I suggest you go right to the elbow immobilizer to really keep that arm straight. Again, you're retraining the brain, so it's not cheating. I get that sometimes, you know, I gotta learn how to keep it down, but if you're not doing it correctly, then the brain isn't learning it. So if the arm is flexing up every time you go to move your leg, just put the elbow immobilizer on and then go back to moving the legs. As you can see, this is kind of similar to a stepping pattern, so that's why I like it. Now, I also do this same motion without the Core Max, and now what we're doing is we're working the reverse. So now we're learning how to activate the muscles that lift the leg, just doing one leg at a time. So again, dissociating the left side from the right side, and doing whatever you can to keep that arm straight or prevent that arm from flexing up towards your face. One other variation that I like to do laying down before we get to the standing, I promise we are getting to standing, is to challenge the arm now. So the arm can lay flat on the mat and you can do some of this leg movement without it coming up. A progression that you could do laying down to really challenge that coordination between the arms and the legs is now put your arms up. Similar to last week's video of that isolated elbow extension with the Pilates ring, and see if you can keep your arms there and the arms that arm doesn't flex down towards your face. Now you're straightening the arm against gravity and it makes it a little bit more challenging. So can you keep it up there with the added resistance of gravity and add leg movements? Mastering this laying down, you're gonna have much more success keeping the arms straight when you actually go to standing, because this is extremely challenging if you have any abnormal movement patterns at all. Now we are gonna go into standing. There's a few different progressions or a few different levels I'm going to give depending on where you're at in the recovery process. The first level would be to kind of find a way to passively keep the arm down. So if you stand up and you have no ability at all to actively straighten that arm out, meaning it just stays stuck up in a flexed position, this is the method you want to use to reintroduce standing while passively keeping that arm extended. So it all starts with this wand. It's actually just a Swifter attachment. If you guys have been following me long enough, you know I like to find cheap things that are easily accessible to most people. I just happen to find this on a clearance rack, and the reason I like it, it's length adjustable and it's lightweight, so it works really well for this activity. And then I just duct tape some type of a rope or an extension to the other end. And then from here, what you're gonna do is you're gonna take your involved arm and then you will need one of those blue straps, but you're gonna strap your involved hand to the wand, and then you want your palm facing up. If you put this on in sitting, if you put this on in standing, you kind of want your palm facing forward. And now the reason that you need that rope is there's really no other way to get this wand behind your back, which is the position it's going to need to be in when we go to stand up. You're going to bring it behind your back and then just hold it with your other hand, both hands facing forward. Now, as you can see, it keeps the arms straight, my body kind of stopping the wand from coming forward, and then my hand being strapped to the wand is it does keep that arm down. And the reason I chose this wand is because it's lightweight. So if you are someone that has a sublux shoulder, you definitely don't want to put anything that's heavy in your hand and make that subluxation worse. But then you can go through the same progression that I've gone through several times. You can start with a little bit of weight shifting, just lifting the uninvolved heel, kind of loading that leg just a little bit more, and then just progress on from there the whole time that wand keeps that arm straight. Now, the next setup that I find extremely valuable is weight bearing. I've talked about this before in other videos. If you can find any way to do weight bearing on an arm after a stroke or a brain injury, that is best case scenario for so many reasons. I've done a whole video on it, but one is the input that your brain gets through all the joints. It kind of wakes the brain up to that arm, which is great. Also, it does decrease the spasticity a little bit, just having that pressure through that arm. And then just like kids, when you bounce them and their legs kind of extend, it's kind of along those same lines, just having that pressure or that force coming up through the arm, you might get an automatic extension. So it's just another opportunity for your brain to relearn how to straighten that arm out. Now, I know some of you are thinking, my arm can't get down like that. There are so many different ways to try this. I highly recommend that you just keep trying and finding a way that you can keep your arm down on a surface and work on standing in this position. A couple of my favorites are either just putting a weight on the hand to hold the arm down. Definitely put that dicem underneath it that I talk about a lot. It's a little bit sticky, so your hand's not going to slide forward, and it'll just help to hold it in place a little bit better. If that's not working, put the elbow immobilizer back on again. That should definitely help to keep the arm down, or do a combination of the two. Put the elbow immobilizer on and put the weight on there to try and keep that arm down. And then you're just gonna do a very similar progression. Do a little bit of unloading on the opposite leg. So the uninvolved leg, just doing a heel lift, loading that involved leg, stressing that involved leg a little bit more, and trying to keep that arm extended. And then if you can and you feel comfortable, you can go into a little bit of a forward, backward stepping in this position. Now, when it comes to the weight bearing, if I'm going to see someone for the first time and they've just had a stroke, I am always going to do whatever I can to try and get both hands down onto a walker for the very reasons that I just said, is giving that input into that arm, but you're also kind of keeping the brain aware that there is an arm over there. So not only do you have a chance of activating some of the muscles that extend the arm, but you're also just giving input to the brain that, hey, there is an arm over here. It's not dead. It exists. So using both hands on a walker is a great way to encourage that. Now, I did show a really quick video clip of my hand on a walker with this walker attachment. I love this. I'll put a link again in this video in the description below. It helps to keep your hand on a walker. So you're using both hands, you're getting that weight bearing, but also just a little bit of the weight of the walker is keeping that hand down. As well as if you are someone and your leg swings out to the side or your leg stays way out to the side, it's really hard to do that. You really have to keep your legs more towards the middle. So the walker kind of gives you boundaries too that you have to stay within when you're taking that step. And then that attachment, just if any of you have tried it, most of you, your hand probably rolls underneath the grip. That this attachment really does keep your hand on top of the walker. So, little side note here, that is part of a spastic pattern a lot of times when your hand rolls under it. So you are relearning how to move without going into one of those synergy patterns. If you don't have that, no problem. You can always just take a blue strap and just strap your arm to the walker. But it's just another variation for those of you who said that your arm was drawing up when you walk, but you can keep it down when you're laying down. Even though it's harder to walk this way, gotten used to not walking with a walker, it might be something you want to consider just to relearn how to keep that arm a little bit straighter when you are walking. So I hope all that made sense. I hope you guys enjoyed this series. I hope it was helpful. I do think I'm going to add one on reaching because I did get some comments on that some of you do want to see a video on how to straighten the arm out, for instance, when lifting the arm up for reaching. reaching into a cabinet. So stay tuned and look forward to that video. I had fun spending time with you all today, and I look forward to seeing you all in the next video. You all have a great day.